16 facts and 1 persistent fiction about bats. Bats very often settle near human habitation or even directly in it in attics, basements, etc. However, unlike other representatives of the animal and feathered world, bats practically do not interact with humans. This is also one of the reasons why human knowledge about bats is quite limited. But scientists and researchers managed to establish some interesting facts. 1. Based on the information contained in popular science sources, biologists still continue to classify bats, foxes, dogs and other semi-blind animals that fly using echolocation and membranous wings. They use distinctive features that are certainly obvious to every naturalist, such as the absence of a claw on the second toe of the forelimbs, a shortened facial part of the skull, or the presence of a tragus and an antitragus on the external ears. 2. The conjecture that mice have some special sense that allows them to avoid collisions with obstacles even in the dark was expressed by Abbot Spallanzani, a professor at the University of Padua, at the end of the 18th century. 3. In Antarctica there are supposedly creatures very similar to huge bats. They are called cryons. American polar explorer Alex Horwitz, whose 2 comrades were killed by cryons, was the first to describe them. 4. The ancient Greek fabulist Aesop explained the nocturnal lifestyle of bats in a very original way. In one of his fables, he described a joint trading venture between a bat, a blackthorn and a duck. With the money that the bat borrowed, the blackthorn bought clothes, and the duck bought copper. But the ship on which the trio was transferring the goods sank. 5. In some European cultures and in China, the bat was considered a symbol of well-being, success in life, and wealth. However, Europeans treated these symbols in an extremely utilitarian way. To enhance the worship of the bat, it had to be killed first. 6. Despite the fact that bats have been using ultrasound for hunting for at least several tens of millions of years, it is believed that bats lived on Earth at the same time as dinosaurs. The evolutionary mechanisms of their potential victims practically do not work in this regard. 7. Even children know that mice use ultrasonic radar to orient themselves in space, and this is perceived as an obvious fact. But, in the end, ultrasonic waves differ from just sound and light only in frequency. What is much more striking is not the method of obtaining information, but the speed of its processing. Each of us has had to make our way through a crowd. If this has to be done quickly, clashes are inevitable, even if everyone in the crowd is extremely polite and helpful. 8. Observations of large populations of bats, hundreds of thousands and millions of individuals, have shown that such populations have at least the rudiments of collective intelligence. This is most clearly manifested when flying out of cover. First, a group of scouts of several dozen individuals leaves them. Then the mass flight begins. It obeys certain rules. Otherwise, if, for example, hundreds of thousands of bats fly out at the same time, a stampede would arise, threatening mass death. 9. Carlsbad bats are considered record holders for the longest seasonal migration distance. In autumn they travel south, covering a distance of 1,300 kilometers. However, Moscow bat researchers claim that the animals they ringed were caught in France, 1,200 kilometers from the Russian capital. At the same time, a huge number of bats quietly winter in Moscow, taking refuge in relatively warm shelters. For all their uniformity, bats are sedentary and migratory. 10. In tropical and subtropical latitudes, fruit bats move after ripening fruits. The migration path of these large bats can be very long, but it is never too winding. Accordingly, the fate of the gardens that the fruit bats came across along the way is sad. Local residents reciprocate the fruit bats' feelings. Their meat is considered a delicacy, and during the day the fruit bats are practically helpless. They are very easy to catch. 11. Bats live up to 15 years, which is very long for their size and lifestyle. Therefore, the population increases not due to rapid birth rates, but due to greater survival of the cubs. The mechanism of reproduction also helps. Bats mate in the fall, and the female can give birth to 1 or 2 cubs in May or June, with a pregnancy lasting 4 months. According to a plausible hypothesis, the female's body, only having recovered from hibernation and having accumulated everything necessary for pregnancy, gives a signal, after which delayed conception begins. 12. Bat cubs are born very small and helpless, but develop quickly. Already on the 3rd or 4th day of life, the babies are grouped into a kind of nursery. Interestingly, females find their children even in groups of dozens of newborns. Within a week, the weight of the cubs doubles. By the 10th day of life, their eyes open. In the 2nd week, teeth erupt and real fur appears. 13. The vast majority of bats feed on plant or small animal food. A typical example for Russian latitudes is mosquitoes. Only 3 species living in Latin and South America give these animals their sinister reputation as vampires. 14. Bats were at one time a priority of American strategy in the war against Japan in 1941 to 1945. According to various estimates, research and training spent on them from $2 to $5 million. Judging by declassified information, bats did not turn into deadly weapons solely thanks to the atomic bomb. It was recognized as more effective. 15. Bats do not build homes for themselves. They easily find suitable shelter almost anywhere. This is facilitated by both their lifestyle and the structure of the body. 16. The main species of bats feed on insects, and insects that are harmful to crops. In the 1960s and 1970s, scientists even believed that bats had a decisive influence on the populations of some pests.